And verify I'm recording. And I am. All right. Well, good morning. Yes, to answer your question, Basil, my conference paper was accepted. I'm going to Italy in June, the end of June, to present it before the European Academy of Management, before my peers, other people with PhDs, other researchers. So I've got my flight booked. I've got my reservations, my hotel reservations booked, and uh, been collecting luggage and everything that I need. Next month I'll go buy myself a suit because I lost so much weight I don't fit in my suits anymore. So I had to. Yes, come on in. You're here to do the little presentation. You will. Yes, before you do that, put you on screen over here because we got this is a Zoom class. So I want to make sure that. All right, this is they're going to introduce themselves, but they got a small presentation to do before we get to our lecture today. Take it away.
I'm Kevin, this is Julie.
Hi.
We're just gonna real quick tell you about a couple of programs. One is the student referral program. That you guys have an opportunity, if you refer a student and they end up applying and coming to clearing, you get a $250 scholarship and so does the student. The applications are on our website. If you know anybody, it's a great opportunity to, spread your experience and you guys are having here with some others and you get rewarded for it. So.
Yeah. And then I probably talked to a lot of you about this, but we're starting a new club starting in the fall. It's called Student Ambassador Program. It's basically a great way to like build leadership skills. And you'll be like the face of the student body, leading campus tours, helping with admissions events like orientation and homecoming and all the events we put on every year. So it's just a great opportunity. It's a really little time commitment, 35 hours a semester. You get a $500 scholarship per semester when you're in the program. Our interviews start next week. You need a staff reference, like a recommendation letter to be considered for the program, a resume, and then you just fill out the simple application on the back. But
You looked over at me, dude. The adjuncts can write them too?
yeah,
Okay.
adjuncts.
That explains why you looked over here.
Yeah, so if your professor's so kind to write you a reference.
We'll see about that.
Please ask. But great opportunity, great extra money, good building on new skills. So I'll leave some flyers here for you guys, and you can also apply on the website.
No worries.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so there is something to consider. And since nobody has been in the habit of bringing me an apple, I don't know if I'm going to write any letters. I'm kidding. Let me know if you're interested. And of course, I get that contact information from them. So what else do we need to do before we get started today? I need to bring this screen up over here. All right, let's go ahead and begin here today. We got a few people online and we got those here in the classroom, and believe it or not, I might be here. Let's talk about entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship provides the opportunity for a new company to be started, okay? So entrepreneurship is one of those fancy, hard to spell words. It basically means there's a startup. You hear the word startup, same thing. A startup is started by entrepreneurs. It's an entrepreneurial endeavor. Now, the risk of failure is high in entrepreneurship, okay? Byers and Stanberry cited Patrick Henry, who was a consultant, still is, not one of the founding fathers in America, because if you're familiar with American Revolutionary history, Patrick Henry was one of the founding fathers. However, the consultant, Patrick Henry, said that the risk of failure is right about 75%. Now, that sounds pretty high to me. Now, another source places that rate at 50% after 5 years. So after the business starts, within 5 years, 50% of those businesses have closed. And after 10 years, over 70% have failed. They've shut down. Okay, now the thing to remember is failure is not necessarily a bad thing. We see people like, Steve Jobs or any of these, big gurus out there. And we say to ourselves, oh, they're so lucky. If I was, no, they failed many times before they finally got going. And that's what's key about starting up a new business or about engaging in innovation is you have a very high risk of failing at what you're doing, but you don't back down from it. And when you do fail, you look at the lessons you can learn to improve. So it's not necessarily a failure in that way because okay, you try to start up and it fails, but you get back up, you go at it again, you've learned some things. Maybe the next time it will succeed. Now, another pitfall we need to talk about that your authors of the textbook noted, they pointed out that ethical failure is another pitfall that these entrepreneurs must avoid. This can occur when the leaders, these entrepreneurs, fall victim to their own ego, their hubris. They let their hubris get in the way of ethical decision making. So everything we've been talking about in this class, they do the opposite. Oh, I know better. There's an episode of the old TV show MASH. Love that show. It's from the 70s and 80s. And one of the doctors in the later seasons, he is upper crust, wealthy society. And he thinks that he can handle things. He thinks he knows best. Well, he winds up getting addicted to amphetamines. Okay. He thought, well, I can prescribe for myself and I know better. But he didn't. He fell victim to his own hubris. The same thing happens with entrepreneurs. They think, well, we have to have this attitude right now because we have to succeed. It's a dog eat dog world and I know best and stuff. The thing is okay, that might work for a time period, but eventually your unethical behavior is going to catch up with you. When it does, you're going to lose your reputation. We got some examples to talk about, pointing that out today. Now, the textbook, they cite Uber as an example. Uber? Yeah, it was Uber. Uber, the corporate culture at the main office, so I think it was out in San Francisco, they basically welcomed misogyny, homophobia, sexual harassment. And not only did they welcome it, but the senior leaders were engaging in it. Now that's pretty bad. Okay, let's try this again. This time. The authors of the textbook, they continued and discussed how the senior leadership there, the CEO and at least one of the other people, they permitted and even engaged in that negative behavior. And this ultimately led to a forced resignation of the CEO, Travis Kalanick. Now, Kalanick was revolutionary when it came to integrating, bringing together technology and transportation. Okay. Ride sharing was a revolutionary, innovative idea. He could have been at the top of the game for years, but he wasn't, because not only did he allow this type of negative behavior, he was also guilty of doing it as well. They noted that your textbook noted that many other companies have fallen into very similar issues as Uber. They stated, holding destructive egos in check is an ethical challenge at many successful businesses, particularly at hard-riding startups. They continued, founders and their startup teams need to be aware of how deeply their attitudes towards others, their visible treatment of employees, customers, and clients, and their display of fairness will come to shape the company they are building. What you do at the beginning when you're starting a company or when you're starting any endeavor is going to set the tone and the attitude that's going to follow for decades. And corporate culture begins from the very beginning. Okay. Now, granted, there's a different corporate culture with a startup than there is with a traditional business that's been there for a while, but you have to still maintain your ethics. You got to maintain those values, those core values that you want that company to be built on. And you also got to understand that the corporate culture is going to have to shift when the business begins to grow. We're going to see more about that in just a minute. The textbook noted that many founders, they almost become like superstars, like Steve Jobs, just to name one there. But this can lead founders to act out as they always wanted to, but they couldn't. So they always had this propensity towards sexual harassment or misogyny or homophobia, but they had kept that unethical behavior in check because, well, that wasn't seen as being permissible. Well, now they're at the superstar level. It's kind of like Kiss, the band Kiss, notorious for several things. First of all, the bass guitar player, Gene Simmons, the guy with the long tongue, he never drinks alcohol or does drugs. Okay. He refuses to do that. But when it comes to other adult forms of activity, he has been very prolific, if you get my drift. And he's got a reputation that's like the books being written about it. He has a reputation because of his actions, his behavior. Other members of the band would destroy hotel rooms. Okay. They got this reputation. Yes.
What did he do? I have no clue.
He will say, dated many, 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 many women, but it wasn't necessarily dating. It was more or less hooking up in the hotel at night after the concerts. And he became notorious through entertainment for that.
Okay.
And so his reputation, some people see that as, hey, that's cool, man. And a lot of people go, yeah, you're just using and abusing people. You're abusing women at that point. And so his reputation took a beating. Okay. Other members of the band would get drunk or super, super high and all kinds of drugs and trash the room. It harmed their reputation. They did these things because they had superstar status. And as a superstar, you feel like you can get away with more. Well, the same thing is true in business. So these founders, when they become like superstars, they almost give up on keeping their ethics in check and they'd act out who they really are. Yes.
Do you think they like did this because they were like superstars and they think that like, okay, like, I'm on top of it and I can do it? Or do you think, like, especially as a rock star, like they would just did it, of course, obviously, like more like keeping their image?
I think it's actually both. You take someone like Marilyn Manson, and this is my own personal take. Marilyn Manson, a few years back, was accused of some sexual misconduct. Well, it came out that it was all fabricated. It was a lie. The same thing with Johnny Depp happened. Okay. Amber Heard. Okay. Everything was found to be out of in the legal system. They were found to be not guilty. Okay. It was all fabricated. However, the reputations were still ruined just by the allegations. But I thought long and hard about this. So the fans, we crave these rock stars. We crave them to be rebels. And so when they become a rebel, they're at that superstar status. They're living out what we expect them to do, but then they act in a way that makes us upset. And then the fans turn on them. I don't think that's fair to the entertainer. I think that's quite unfair. And I think in the case of some groups like KISS and even in business with the entrepreneurs hitting that status, sometimes it is their own ego thinking, I can do this, I can get away with it. And other times they're just living out what they think they should. They're trying to fit in with an image.
Also have a big target on your back, obviously.
Well, true, exactly. And that's why I think that having a big target on your back means that you need to be extra careful to keep yourself in check. Now, you take the lead singer of AFI, A Fire Inside. I think his name is Jonathan. I forget his full name. He is what they call it in the straight edge lifestyle. No drugs, no crazy life, no alcohol, but he's got a very hard, heavy, alternative look. And he sings that way, but he's known for following a very strict set of values. So I think it's possible for people to hit a superstar status and maintain a core values and ethics, but they have got to really make that choice and then really work on it, because it's real easy once you hit that status to give it up. And the same thing is true in business. When somebody becomes a CEO of a large company and that they founded and they're making millions and millions of dollars every year, you kind of begin to think you're pretty hot stuff. And you have to remember, wait a minute, I'm just like everybody else. I just happen to have a really good team of people and we had a good idea and we made it happen. I'm the front man of this group. I'm the lead singer. I'm the front man. I'm not the whole group. There's a whole team. And humility pays off. And that's why I always tell people in my leadership courses, blend your leadership style with some servant leadership or humble leadership that will help to avoid these problems. It can, it really can. But getting back to this right here, it is important to note that many successful entrepreneurs fail many times before they finally succeed. Look at Bill Gates. I don't know how many times he failed to begin with, but when he got started, he was what, in a garage in like Palo Alto, California. You have people working out their vans, in garages, in basements. And they became these multi-billionaires, richest people on the planet, most influential technological people on the planet. But look where they began. Just think how many times they tried to do something and didn't succeed. This can give people the false perception that success is easy, and it never is. That's why it's always good to peel back the layers of the onion and look and see, aha, so they had it hard at the beginning. So they failed a number of times. I see now. So persistence is the key, determination. A special kind of person becomes a successful entrepreneur. They must be able to handle the immense stress and endure personal hardship. There's always a financial and personal cost when founding a startup. One, the personal cost is you're giving up 1,000,000 hours of your own life every week. You don't have a life anymore. Your family may miss you for a year and a half. Okay? The financial cost. You may sink everything you have financially into it and get a bunch of people to invest and sink everything they have into it. There is a huge cost going into startups. And we always look at the financial side, but there's a personal aspect too. Like I said, less time with family, less time with your recreation, your hobbies. Your mental health may suffer. And many startups suspend part of their humanity while founding the company just to endure that hardship. But this costs the firm later in the future. So they suspend part of their humanity, their empathy, their compassion. They set that aside while they're engaging in this startup because they have got all this hardship that they have to endure. But then they forget, wait a minute, I've got to be able to pick that back up. And I think that's the problem right there. And they never return to picking up that part of their humanity. And they hit that superstar status and then they go amok. They lose their ethical compass in the process. They may have started off being a very ethical person, but they gave up that part of the humanity to endure the hardship of starting up an entrepreneurial business. And then they forgot to return back and pick it back up again. That's why I think it's very important that we talked about, even in week 1, that we got one source for our ethics. One source. And when we have one source for our ethics, if we've got to tone down parts of our humanity, we never truly give them up. I think when somebody gives up part of their humanity and their empathy, their ethical side, they're actually using 2 or more systems to pull their ethics from. And so at home, they may be a sweetheart to their family, and they might be a monster at work. Well, a person can be a sweetheart at home and be firm at work and still be the same person and run under one set of ethics. If you do that, then you're not going to give up that humanity. You just may have to temper down your compassion for a while and your empathy, and then it's still there. It's still right there. And it's always haunting you saying, yeah, but you need to be nice to these people. Because starting something up, you're going to have to require people to work harder than they ever have. And as a startup founder, as an entrepreneur, don't expect, or a leader in general, don't expect, okay, Elon Musk is notorious for working harder than anyone. He really is. He's always either at Tesla or wherever he's working, okay? Always there. He's sleeping on the floor, stuff like that, right? But then he expects people that work for him to do the same thing. So he gave up his personal life. He's paying a hard cost, but he expects everyone else to do the same thing. And if you don't, you're out. As a leader, okay, at the beginning, you expect you and your team are going to give up parts of your personal life and pay that cost. But when it grows, when the organization begins to bring more employees in and it grows financially, you have to change the organizational structure from being a startup to being a traditional company. At which point in time, you're not going to retain good quality talent if you're expecting them to sleep on the floor 6 nights a week. So you have to bear in mind, yes, we're starting this up. It's hard now, but we're going to get to a point where we're going to shift and we're going to become more empathetic as a company, more understanding. We're not going to expect people to put in 70-hour work weeks, sleep on the floor. Will you be the person you want to be at the end of the startup process? Achieving success as an entrepreneur can cost you the very humanity you had at the beginning. Founders must fully understand this when they start up the company and decide if it's worth the cost or if they should install safeguards to protect themselves from this. These safeguards, these help us keep our values in check, our ethics in check. We do this by understanding our core principles, our core values. We have to understand who we are as people. Decisions must be made in very rapid succession at the beginning. But after the company has been established, bureaucracy begins to take over, and this slows down the decision-making process. Businesses that are large, that have grown, they need to have a bureaucratic system in place in order for everybody to function and do their job. That's just how it works. In a startup, you don't have that many employees. You're not that big, and you've got to be able to shoot, move, and communicate, as we said in the Army. You got to be able to do that now. And so you got to be very agile. Startups eventually become what they were avoiding in the beginning. So in the beginning, you're avoiding the traditional structure of a business because it's not going to help you in the process of enduring the hardship and doing what it takes to start the business. But once you build it up, it must become the traditional organizational structure. Otherwise, you're not going to keep quality employees and you're not going to be able to attract quality talent. The authors pointed out that as more levels of management are added to the organizational structure, the more formalized and traditional the organization becomes. And so you start up your business. It's a startup. It's typically a very flat organizational structure. Okay. But as you grow, as more people come in, you have to be able to make departments. You have to have people in charge of the departments, divisions, etc. And it takes on almost that more siloed look. Now, a wise person, in my opinion, creates a matrix or a cross-functional structure in the organization to allow for everyone to be able to still integrate together like they did when it was flat, but being in that the organization of how the organization's set up now to be able to withstand having that many employees doing that much business. This is also caused by the addition of more procedures. Even though procedures are necessary to operate a company, at the beginning, you got very few. 5 years down the road, you're up and running good. You've got a ton of procedures. You have manuals, standard operating procedure manuals all over the place because you've got to codify how things are to be done. And this process was predicted by the German academic Max Weber in a book that was published in 1925 after his death. Basically, Max Weber predicted that agile startups would be ripe for bureaucratization as they grow and age. Okay, so economists and academics, we know this. We've known it for a while. You start something up, you're agile, you can shoot, move, and communicate and make rapid decisions. But eventually, it's going to slow down because you got more people. I was on an aircraft carrier in the Navy. I was also in the Army, but in the Navy, I was on an aircraft carrier. To turn around an aircraft carrier takes quite a while. Now, if you're on a small boy, as they call them, a smaller ship, you can turn them pretty quick. But the bigger something is, the slower the process is to change the direction. The same thing is true in businesses. The larger the business, the more bureaucratization you have to have, the slower change is going to happen. It's going to happen, but it's going to go slower. There's no option but for it to go slow. Now let's talk about entrepreneurial culture. Byers and Stanberry pointed out that most entrepreneurial leaders have to be very charismatic, but charisma leads to inflated egos. I'm going to do a little tangent here. Charismatic leadership is great in a startup, but did you know that most people who start and lead and govern cults are all charismatic leaders? Here in America, we had a group of people that eventually moved to South America, started a colony called Jonestown. This is back in like the 1970s. Jim Jones was the founder. He was a very charismatic person. People sold their homes, emptied out their bank accounts, and gave it all to him. In the end, he had them all kill themselves, and those that wouldn't, he had them killed. Charisma is beneficial. But when that's all you rely on as a leader, you're on dangerous thin ice. You have to have empathy. Charismatic leaders seldom do. You have to have compassion. You have to think ahead. So charisma works at the beginning, but remember, even as a CEO, you're starting something up, you're a charismatic leader. You might need to step down from being CEO when the organization grows and needs a more traditional type leader. So part of it is knowing when to back down from the position of leadership. I'm starting up a company. I'm charismatic. It's going good. 2 years in, whoa, we got a lot more people working for us. I think I'm going to back out now. We're going to find somebody that can come in here who's less charismatic. Hey, you have a good day, okay, Biles?
Thank you, sir. You too.
This means that the approach to leadership must change as the company grows in size and age. Demanding leaders tend to push productive employees away, and new employees find the work environment undesirable. Seriously? Startup lore. The charismatic leader who founded the company becomes a major part of that organization's story, its lore. They will always be enshrined as the person who's founded that company. And this can create an attitude, kind of the good old days mentality in that company. And this is where you hear people saying, well, that's not how we did this before. You remember back in the good old days when Bob was the CEO here? Well, that's what they're referring to. They're going back to the lore. Bob may have been very charismatic, but he was not the leader that was going to lead the company once it grew and aged. As the leadership style changes due to the increasing size and the age of the company, many remember back to those good old days and attempt to cling on to that status quo. Timothy Clark talks about this status quo. When there's uncertainty, humans cling to status quo, the old way of doing things. That's not going to lead to creativity or innovation. Okay, so the company was founded, it was started, it was innovative, it became stable, it grew. Leadership style now does not need to be a charismatic entrepreneurial individual, but somebody who's maybe a servant leader and maybe a bureaucratic or diplomatic type leader. They come in and they're leading, but the old timers in the company remember back to the first leader and they're like, oh, things worked better. Decisions were made faster. We grew faster. Yes, you're also at the point you've grown. You've matured as a company. You don't approach things in the same way. You need to do something new for this company. Entrepreneurial leaders tend to work very long hours and expect their staff to do the same, but this mentality does not work in a company that has grown and aged. When the entrepreneurial mindset clashes with the more traditional organizational approach, there can be hurt feelings on both sides. People get offended. While this can be catastrophic for employees, it can be devastating to the customers and clients who depend and rely on that company. The promises made to the customers and clients begin to be broken, trust is shattered, and the reputation is ruined. You're starting up a company. You make promises to people. We're going to do better than our competitors. The company grows. Bureaucracy now has to come in because the company is so large. Now things are slower. The customers aren't being treated exactly the same. They're being treated just fine, but they're not being treated as they were as when it was a startup. Now they get hurt. The reputation is ruined. Business ethics have changed in this case. We went from one set of ethos to another. That's why I think when a startup comes in, they need to not just say, well, we're going to do this, this, and this, and this because it's new and innovative, but say, okay, what can we have in a sustainable way? Sustainability-oriented innovation is essential. What can we maintain for 10 or 15 years? If we can't maintain it for 10 or 15 years, let's not promise it. And I think that could solve some of those problems there. Let's now turn our attention to advertising. There was a time when social media did not exist. Believe it or not, you guys are young. When I was a child, a teenager, a young adult, social media was not a thing. Social media began to really kind of come into the picture when I was probably in my mid-20s. And it was just the beginning. It was the Wild West days. So has social media affected business ethics regarding advertising? Of course it has. According to Kelly Jensen, she called this the digital era. She also stated the internet is arguably the single most influential factor of our culture, transforming the way we view communication, relationships, and even ourselves. Social media platforms have evolved to symbolize the status of both individuals and businesses alike. Today, using social media to create brand awareness, drive revenue, engage customers, and attract new ones isn't optional anymore. Now it is an absolute must. So yes, businesses must go to social media, but there are some pitfalls. Issues revolving around data leaks and breaches of customer information have plagued companies that use social media. What can a company do to protect against this problem? Well, of course, they can bring in experts and install programs and run training programs and whatever, but they must use social media to, if they want to attract new customers and retain the old ones. But how do they mitigate the negative effects of that cost? Now they have more exposure. They're more susceptible to data leaks. They're more susceptible to a reputational shift. How many times have we seen in cancel culture that an organization, the reputation is ruined overnight? All because of maybe a misunderstanding. So there's a pitfall there. Does this also create an environment where customers purchase items simply because they see them on social media instead of really actually needing them? Of course it does. Who has been on Amazon lately? Other than me. All of us, right? Now, Amazon isn't necessarily a social media site, but it is an online retailer. We see something on there. It pops up. We get emails. We found this. You might like it. I wasn't looking for it, but now I am. And now I want one. Okay. Now I spent money I didn't need to on something I don't need to do something I never wanted to have done anyway. Buyers of Stanberry asked a very pertinent question that was first asked by John Kenneth Galbraith. Is it possible for a sophisticated advertising campaign to create a demand for a product whose benefits are frivolous at best? Of course they can do it, but is it ethical? This is what's called the dependency effect. We're creating a dependency. We're creating a market for our product. Have companies begun to manipulate customers into buying things they don't need? Of course, but they've been doing that since the beginning of advertising. It's just now it's more ubiquitous because of the internet. Now, we're going to take another tangent. There's something, if you ever take a course, Management 4950, we talk about systems thinking. Systems thinking is a subset of systems theory, which falls under complexity theory. Basically, it goes like this. The more connections that we have, the more interconnected we are. However, the more interconnections we have, we begin to lose the quality of interconnectedness with those people. If I've got a good friend group, 5 people, I can actually know each of those people very well. Now, I might have one really best friend, and then I've got 5 friends that are in that group. Let's now take that up to 1,000. I can't dedicate the same time to each person. I don't know these people. But social media does just that. We wind up with thousands of people we really don't know. And when they say something to us, do we let it affect us? Do we let it impact us? Oftentimes we do. We begin to get offended, hurt, bothered, depressed. We seek their approval before we do something. We don't even know these people. Why would I want their approval? So we are very interconnected as a society now, more so than ever before, but yet we're more disconnected at the same time. Also, misinformation can happen. Information on the internet, on social media, has not been vetted most of the time. So when I hear something, when I read something on social media, I don't just believe it. If it's really intriguing, I will look it up. If I can find other quality, dependable sources that confirm it, then I will start buying it. believing it. If not, then I put that up to misinformation. Misinformation spreads like wildfire because there is no way to verify the information as it's being sent out. So people get information through social media that's not been verified, it's not true, it's very false. They begin to believe it, it impacts their life and shapes what they do. So this interconnectedness, even though it lets us know what's happening across the world instantly, also spreads lies and falsehoods instantly. Is it ethical? Let's now turn our attention to psychology in advertising. Advertising has always relied on psychological appeals, meaning the company uses advertising to reach our self-esteem and persuade us that we will feel better about ourselves if we use certain products. That's advertising in a nutshell. Psychological appeals normally contradict sound ethics, because I don't really think that if I use this brand of toothpaste, I actually am going to feel better about myself. It's toothpaste, but they want me to think that. Now, you give me a toothpaste that takes off some of the stains on my teeth, maybe that will boost my self-esteem a little bit. Okay, good. But there's a lot of brands out there that do that. What makes yours more important? What makes yours better? So companies actually engage in a lot of deceit in their advertisements, and they go down unethical paths by making psychological appeals that really have no basis. Now we're going to look at the generational differences in advertising. Each generation perceives necessities and luxuries differently. Many advertising professionals study these and exploit them for the benefit of the companies they work for. One generation may value savings, putting things away for the future. Another generation may prefer spending what you have now, live because you can't use it after you're dead mentality. Legally, as long as the advertisers do not violate the law, they suffer no legal repercussions. But are they violating sound business ethics? Does the amount of pressure placed on the consumer indicate the ethicality of the advertisement? In some respects, I think it does. If an advertiser is placing lots of pressure on the customers, the consumers, they may be making psychological appeals that are so grandiose, so full of falsity, that people are buying their product and they're not getting the rewards that they were promised. They may be spending money they don't have on things they don't need, like I said earlier. Now, what about the age of the audience that the advertisers target? Byers and Stanberry pointed out that children are often subjected to more advertisements than adults due to the amount of TV and internet they are exposed to, combined with the susceptibility of their age. A 5-year-old child doesn't have the years of experience that you at 18, 19, 20, or me at 52 has. We use that experience in determining our choices, our decisions. They don't have that. So all they see is this new toy or this new thing on there, and they think, I have to have it. They also have lower impulse control. So they see it, they want it, they don't get it, they throw a tantrum. Now their parents have got a mad little child, and they trying to figure out how to take care of this negative behavior. Do ads targeted towards children affect them later as adults? Oh, I think it does. I look back to when I was a kid. We didn't even have TV for a number of years in my house. I mean, a lot of people had TV. We just didn't. I would sit down with the Sears catalog, and I would go through it. That was like Amazon before Amazon was around. And I would see things I would want. I still remember those desires, those cravings. And through the years, those desires and cravings I had looking through that catalog have manifested in my shopping habits. So I think there is a relationship there. Should this be regulated? When do adults become victims of English? When do adults become victims of persuasive arguments or advertisements? Now, I want to draw a point here. Persuasive argumentation and persuasive advertisements. Persuasion is usually grounded in ethics. Coercion is the one that's not ethical. So I look and I say, is the advertiser trying to coerce me into making this decision? Meaning they and the company they represent are going to benefit. I am not. They're using me. When I was 18 years old, I was fresh into the Navy, just got out of boot camp. I was walking around a mall in North Chicago, and these two lovely young women in their probably early 20s sell me this photography package deal. And I like photography. I started it when I was young. I've done photography all my life. Send out your film, get it developed, you get these prints. It was a package deal sort of thing. I never used it once. Cost me $1,000. Now, $1,000 in 1991 is worth a lot more than $1,000 today. They use coercion through forms of manipulation, using their attractiveness to get me to buy. You see that a lot around military bases. So I definitely fell victim to the textbook refers to as a persuasive advertisement. Technically, I would make it a coercive advertisement. Now we're going to look at subliminal advertising. We're almost done with today's lecture. Byers and Stanberry pointed out that children and elderly are potentially more susceptible to subliminal advertising. But science has yet to really prove that subliminal messaging actually occurs. Now, there is some anecdotal evidence. The movie The Exorcist was released in the 70s. There is a point in there where there is a one frame inserted into the picture that was really scary. They also had sounds at that same time, if I recall the story, that were real creepy and unsettling. People actually felt physically ill because of that. So I think that subliminal messaging, maybe we're going to learn one day that it does exist, but right now science hasn't proven that it truly, emphatically, empirically does. This hasn't stopped movie directors and advertisers from attempting to use subliminal messaging in their products. So while subliminal messaging is not proven, persuasive and coercive advertising is. And if you're using what you think is subliminal messaging in a persuasive or coercive manner, I think you're being unethical. Do we really need a hamburger with 1,885 calories? Whataburger has a triple meat Whataburger on their menu. It has 1,885 calories, 84 grams of fat, 2,080 milligrams of sodium. We're being offered things through advertisements. I was doing the research, getting that little nitnoid fact. I saw the burger. I began to salivate. Now, since July of last year, I eat primarily fresh fruit and vegetables. I eat some protein bars, protein shakes, stuff like that, okay? I eat very healthy. Occasionally, I'll have a steak. Once again, that's usually pretty healthy as long as I don't have it every single day. My cholesterol wouldn't like that, but, once, twice a week, no problem. I saw that burger. I used to weigh over 100 pounds more than I do now. I began to salivate. I wanted one. I had an apple instead. Was very satisfied with my apple. But what I'm saying here is they use this because they know we see that burger and we begin to want one. I don't need 1,800 damn calories in one burger. I usually eat less than that every day. You guys are athletes. You understand what I'm going at here. Something's being advertised to us that we should have this. It's going to harm us. Who's guilty? Whataburger for advertising it, or the consumer for buying it without verifying? I think both are guilty. Because as a consumer, we should verify whether this is good, healthy, we actually need it. We should make informed decisions.
For the consumer, because like if you go to a restaurant or something like in every like burger or something, it's in the calories and everything, so like, you know, you already know.
It didn't used to be that way. In my life, the calories have not been listed.
Yeah, I know.
The,
On
nu-
the menu and stuff, you don't have the calories.
the nutritional content here in America that you see and everywhere, that wasn't always there. Okay, I used to go to McDonald's and there was nothing there that said how many calories was in that burger. Nothing. That's a fairly new thing. Okay, in my lifetime, 52 years of my life, we went from not having it to having it. And I think it's good that we have it because the customer should be the one to make the decision.
It
But,
kind of makes you feel guilty too.
well, yeah,
It's like you want that, but you say it's 1,400 calories for a small thing. and
Yeah,
then
it's
maybe
like,
I'm
okay,
not
never
eating.
mind.
Yeah.
that's why I don't drink very much either.
Even
I-
like drinks, that's
I like making sure I got the right one. Yeah, 0. I like alcohol, but I don't like to drink to get drunk. I like now that I'm older, I drink more out of sophistication. I haven't had in the last 9, 10 months, I've maybe had 2 drinks, 3 drinks. Okay. But I don't have to drink. And if I do, I go, okay, well, that's going to be some calories that are going to be empty. I have to minus that somewhere else. I make the decision, then I decide I do it. I don't want to act impulsively like that in my life when it comes to calories, purchasing things, and yet Amazon still gets me from time to time. I'm getting ready for this trip. I needed new luggage. Well, I like Travel Pro. Got one of their briefcases. This is the second time I've had a Travel Pro briefcase. They're quality. This will last me 10, 15 years. My first one is down in Texas. Somebody has it now. My ex-wife, one of her sons. And that thing will probably last him for another 10, 15 years. Anyway, I wanted to get Travel Pro luggage, but then I thought I need to be careful with my finances. So I went with Samsonite. Still good luggage. Not as good as Travel Pro, but not bad. Then I had to get this and I had to get that and I had to get this. Next thing I know, I'm looking at things I don't need. Okay. I still buy things I don't need because I fall victim to persuasive and coercive advertising. But I think that the companies and the advertisers have a responsibility. The consumers have a responsibility. Neither party is guilt-free in this. And I think both parties should see it as their duty to exercise caution. On the side of the businesses and advertisers, yes, you want to promote that product. You're going to promote your product. That's what you're there for. But don't do it in a way that promises things the customer will never experience. That's today's lecture. Does anybody have any questions? By the way, I really appreciate you all chiming in throughout. That's awesome. Thank you very much for your input today. And online, you guys are more than welcome to chime in also. I like interactivity in my classes. All right, so Wednesday.
Good. I have no questions.
Do you have questions? Would you?
No, I said I'm all good.
Okay. Let me check the internet real quick. Our Canvas module for the week. You have a discussion this week. So that's all you have for week 11, a discussion. And so Friday, have the initial post submitted by Friday. Make sure you follow the instructions. It needs to at least be 250 words. If you include information from a source, you must include APA 7 citations and references. Respond to at least 2 classmates. Those replies need to be 75 words in length each. And if you use anything from a source, make sure you include APA 7 citations and references. And then I will see you Wednesday on Zoom for our lecture. You all have a good day now, you hear?
Thank you, sir. Have a great day.
Yeah, you
Thank
too,
you.
Professor. Thank you.
You have a good day.
Thank you. Have a good one.
You too.
Thanks.